When we think of a fantasy campaign, we usually picture a well-oiled machine, noble knights, wise mages, and cunning rogues joining forces on a righteous quest to banish an ancient evil and save the realm. And then we have this specific squad. You've got Cylindra, a mender with a knack for chaos, Draca, whose primary impulse is violence, Ligonis, a dragonborn playing dress-up as a leader, Voluvis, operating under thin disguises, and Drangilis, who mostly just shouts. They aren't tracking down a dark lord or racing to close an apocalyptic portal. Their primary driving conflict is absolute crushing poverty and a complete inability to formulate a coherent plan. If you drop a group of broke adventurers into a hostile environment with zero moral compass, the dragons and goblins take a backseat. The true danger to the local population becomes the adventurers themselves, making desperate logistical decisions to survive the afternoon. Every party faces basic travel logistics. In this case, the team needed to cross a long stretch of highly dangerous territory, and they needed horses to do it. But their collective treasury was completely empty. This flowchart maps out the options available to them. The standard route is simple. You pick up a local job, earn some coin, and purchase your mounts. Our group took the alternate path. They bypassed the local economy entirely, cornered an innocent farmer, and terrified him into handing over his wagon and horses. The cognitive dissonance required to pull this off is impressive. The group repeatedly referred to this grand theft auto as simply politely asking for a favor, quietly sweeping the threats and extortion under the rug. Framing a literal crime as a harmless administrative shortcut is the foundational rule of tactical idiocy. If you convince yourself you're the good guys, any felony becomes justifiable. Things get even messier when divine intervention enters the chat. The deity Zerumus handed the party a direct, non-negotiable, divine mandate. They had to execute their own teammate, Parnas. A proper fantasy epic would treat this as a moment of high tragedy. Swords drawn in the rain, tearful apologies, a battle of ideals. This team sat in a tavern and intensely debated the mechanics of holding a pillow over his face while he slept to limit the noise. What they missed entirely was the business opportunity. They desperately needed funds for a ferry crossing. They could have sold Parnas to the local cannibals, securing their travel budget while still technically fulfilling the god's assassination request. Their actual failure here isn't the willingness to commit cold-blooded murder against an ally. It's the complete inability to see the economic upside of betrayal. Eventually, the squad's choices caught up with them. They found themselves cornered inside a building, completely surrounded by an elite local guard unit known as the Akmanstashi. A coordinated team would negotiate, look for a rear exit, or create a distraction. But this team abandoned all logic, deciding their best escape strategy was walking out the front door, one by one, single file, directly into the waiting ambush. In the ensuing chaos, they managed to capture a guard named Dargus. Instead of leveraging him for a clean escape, they immediately spiraled into a debate over whether they should stab his eyes out or tie him up and throw him in the river just to secure a boat ride. If we look at this scale, the sheer absurdity of their problem-solving comes into focus. They held a hostage, threatened mutilation, and went to war with a local militia, all to avoid paying a standard ferry toll that cost exactly 7 gold pieces. Escalating a minor financial inconvenience into a complex human rights violation is the absolute defining hallmark of this specific squad. Even when they try to play by the rules of conventional combat, things fall apart. Deep in a crypt, they triggered a zombie fight using an absurdly mundane password, Istis Tartilla, and immediately lost control of the engagement. This radar chart maps out standard combat effectiveness. Notice the category for target focus. The basic rule of group combat is to focus fire on a single enemy to quickly remove threats from the board. Instead, the disorganized team actively spread their spells and attacks across completely healthy targets, leaving everyone alive and angry. As the visual updates, you'll clearly see where they actually excel. Statistically, they missed an astronomical number of attacks. At one point, the rolls were so catastrophically bad, a character actually managed to register -2 damage on a swing. Dice rolls rely on luck, and bad streaks happen to everyone. But actively refusing to coordinate your targets while you miss those rolls is a conscious, deliberate choice to fail. Despite themselves, they survived the journey. They casually abandoned an orphan named Sidros along the way, crossed the river, and finally arrived at the Vangita Tavern to celebrate their continued existence. Out of all the ways to unwind, they chose to enter an underground tavern competition. The event was a deadly endurance game where participants willingly let Black Widow spiders bite them, all for a grand prize of 10 gold pieces. Lygonis, the self-appointed leader, stepped up first, took exactly one bite, failed his constitution save, and instantly passed out face first on the table. Draca had to step in, enduring 3 consecutive venomous bites and nearly dying on the spot, just to scrape together the coins. They are utterly incapable of saving the world. They can barely coordinate a retreat, they extort peasants, and they will risk their lives for the price of a cheap lunch. If a client needs a delicate problem solved quietly, they should hire professionals. But if they need an entire enemy army accidentally decimated because a group of idiots stubbornly refused to pay a 7 gold toll, this is the only team for the job.